Good morning, good evening, or good night, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to the UFO Forums Podcast. Tonight, we're discussing the Betty and Barney Hill case, an encounter that helped define the modern UFO abduction phenomenon. Take a moment to like and subscribe, and let's get into it.
It is good to be here, and honestly, looking at the calendar, it is a remarkably fitting time to be revisiting this story.
It really is. Today is Wednesday, January 28, 2026. And the reason the date matters, other than, just marking the passage of another winter week, is that we're coming up on a pretty significant cultural moment for this specific case in New Hampshire.
That's right. Coming up in April of this year, 2026, the Portsmouth Historical Society is opening a major exhibition titled simply Betty and Barney.
Just their first name.
Just their first names. And what's fascinating about this exhibition, and frankly about the massive stack of source material we have in front of us today, is that it represents a shift in how we look at this story. It's trying to reconcile two very, very different legacies.
It's the duality of the Hills that always gets me. On one hand, you have the Betty and Barney Hill, who are, they're the patient zero of modern alien abduction lore.
Mm-hmm.
If you close your eyes and you imagine an alien abduction, the gray skin, the big slanted eyes, the sterile medical table, the concept of missing time, that entire cinematic universe largely starts right here on a lonely, dark road in New Hampshire in 1961.
It's true. Before this, aliens in pop culture were, robots from Mars or these beautiful Nordic humans who came to warn us about nukes.
Right.
After this, they were the Greys. But then you have the other legacy, the one the Historical Society is really fighting to preserve. Betty and Barney Hill, the Portsmouth residents, the civil rights activists, community leaders.
Yeah, these were real people, deeply embedded in the struggles of the 1960s, long before they became the poster children for extraterrestrial contact.
And that's really our job here today, isn't it?
I think so. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just telling a spooky campfire story, though it is definitely that. We're going to sift through the stack of sources we have here. John G. Fuller's seminal book, The Interrupted Journey, the hypnosis transcripts from Dr. Benjamin Simon, the chemical analysis of Betty's dress, the controversial star maps, and the skeptics' counter-arguments to understand why this specific story stuck.
Why this one?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why did this encounter become the template for everything that followed?
We have to treat this as a historical event. Whether you believe it was a physical visitation from Zeta Reticuli, a psychological break, or something in between, the impact is just undeniable. We have archival papers from the University of New Hampshire, we have transcripts, and we have, the benefit of hindsight.
So let's start with the people. I think in pop culture, abductees often get painted with this brush of being, maybe a little on the fringe.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Maybe seeking attention. People living in trailer parks looking for a payday. But that doesn't seem to fit the profile of the Hills at all, does it?
Not in the slightest. And that is, I think, the most crucial point to establish right out of the gate. If you want to understand why this case was taken so seriously, you have to look at who they were in 1961.
Okay.
They were arguably some of the most credible witnesses you could ask for. Barney Hill was a World War II veteran. He worked for the U.S. Postal Service.
And in 1961, that's a big deal. Being a postal worker was a position of significant stability and respect.
Absolutely. A government job. A pension. He also sat on the local board of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights.
Wow. So he's an activist.
He is. And the sources describe him as a pragmatist, a guy with a high IQ, but also a worrier. He wasn't a guy who wanted to rock the boat. He was the kind of guy who planned everything out.
Grounded.
Precisely. He was grounded. And then you have Betty Hill. She was a social worker, a graduate of the University of New Hampshire.
So educated? Professional?
Very. The sources, particularly the notes from the investigator Walter Webb, describe her as having a fierce, somewhat dominating personality.
I see that.
She was tenacious. She was the one who would push for answers. But more importantly than their personalities, we have to look at their social standing.
This is the part that adds so much texture to the story for me.
Yeah.
This was 1961. They were an interracial couple. Barney was black. Betty was white.
And you have to visualize their life to understand the underlying tension. It's 1961. They are driving through rural New Hampshire at night. Barney is a black man driving a new car with a white woman in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
They were active in the NAACP. They were active in the Unitarian Church. In 1961 America, an interracial couple in New Hampshire already had a spotlight on them.
That isn't just a drive. In 1961, that is an act of defiance.
It's a state of constant low-level vigilance. They are already abductees, in a sense, alienated from the societal norm of the time. They are hyper-aware of being watched.
Right. They're already outsiders in their own country.
They had worked very hard to build respectability and standing in their community. The idea that they would fabricate a story about little gray men from space, a story that would invite ridicule, scrutiny, and potentially threaten their jobs and social position, it just goes against every logical survival instinct they would have had.
They had everything to lose and absolutely nothing to gain.
Nothing. They weren't looking for fame. In fact, as we will see, they tried to keep it quiet. They only reported it to the Air Force because they thought it might be a national security issue, not because they wanted to be on the cover of a magazine.
A sense of civic duty, almost.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's go to the night in question. September 19th, 1961. They were driving back to Portsmouth, New Hampshire from a spontaneous vacation. They'd been up to Niagara Falls and Montreal.
And the context of the drive matters, too. They are driving through the night. The sources say they were trying to beat a potential hurricane that was moving up the coast.
So the roads are empty. It's late. They are in the White Mountains, which, if you've ever driven through there at night, is incredibly dark and isolated.
It's pitch black. No streetlights, just the headlights cutting through the trees. And somewhere near Lancaster, New Hampshire, around 10:30 p.m., Betty sees something.
And it's Betty who sees it first.
Always Betty. She spots a bright light. It's moving upward. And her first thought isn't aliens. She's trying to identify it. She thinks maybe it's a falling star, but then she realizes falling stars don't go up.
And Barney, knowing Barney's profile, this pragmatic, logical guy, this must have been torture for him. He's looking at something that defies his physics, and he's trying to force it into the shape of a commercial airliner.
He is clinging to the rational explanation with everything he has. He says it's a satellite. Then, as it moves more erratically, he decides it's a commercial plane on a weird flight path.
He's annoyed by it.
He's very annoyed. The notes say he even stopped the car to walk their dog, Delcy, and he's watching this thing, and he's getting frustrated. He's trying to force reality to make sense.
But the movement is all wrong.
It's completely wrong. The object is bouncing, changing course rapidly. It stops near the Old Man of the Mountain, that famous rock formation that sadly fell down a few years ago.
A landmark.
A literal landmark. And this is where the description gets specific. Betty looks through binoculars and she sees a cigar shape. She describes flashing multicolored lights. Red, amber, blue, green.
A whole set.
And here is a detail that really sells the fear for me. Barney goes to the trunk. He grabs a tire iron. No, he grabs a .22 pistol.
Oh, wow.
The notes say he did it because he was afraid of bears, which is a legitimate concern in the White Mountains, but you get the sense he was just afraid, period.
It's a fascinating psychological detail. He's facing the unknown, something his worldview can't account for, so he reaches for a tangible form of protection. A gun against a bear makes sense.
Right.
A gun against a flying saucer. That is a reaction to pure primal panic.
He wanted control. He was losing control of the situation, and the weapon gave him a sliver of it back.
So the encounter continues. They're driving south. And near Indian Head, things go from weird light in the sky to close encounter.
This is the moment of conscious memory. We need to be clear. This isn't hypnosis. This is what they remembered immediately the next day. The craft descends rapidly. Barney stops the car right in the middle of the highway.
Slams on the brakes.
Right in the middle of Route 3. And now the description changes. It's not just a light anymore. It is a huge, silent object. Barney describes it as pancake-shaped, glowing with this blue-white fluorescence, and it is hovering maybe 80 to 100 feet up.
That is terrifyingly close. That is basically hovering over the treetops. It fills the windshield.
And the silence is what stands out in the report. A helicopter that size would be deafening. A jet would be roaring. This thing is massive and silent.
And Barney, for reasons he probably couldn't explain himself, gets out of the car.
He does. He gets out with his binoculars. He walks toward it.
This is the scene that gives me chills. He looks through the binoculars, and he doesn't just see lights. He sees windows. And inside the windows,
he sees figures. He counts them, 8 to 11 of them. He describes them as humanoid, wearing glossy black uniform.
like a flight crew.
Sort of. And he sees them moving. They move to a control panel looking down at him. Except for one. One figure stays at the window. The leader.
And they lock eyes.
They do. And this is crucial. Barney reports receiving a message. Not a voice speaking out loud, but a thought in his head.
What was the thought?
Stay where you are and keep looking.
That's violating.
It is. And that violation of his own mind seems to be what breaks him. He sees these batwing fins extending from the craft. He sees a structure descending like a ramp, and the reality of it hits him. He screams, "They are going to capture us."
And the panic is absolute.
Utterly. He tears the binoculars away from his eyes so hard he breaks the leather strap. He runs back to the car screaming at Betty, "We gotta get out of here." Throws it in gear. They speed away, and that is when the sound starts.
The beeps.
Right. They hear these rhythmic beeping or buzzing sounds. The sources compare it to a dropped tuning fork. It's vibrating the entire car. It's a physical sensation as much as a sound.
Almost like the car itself is humming.
And with that sound comes a physical sensation, tingling, drowsiness. They fall into a daze.
It's almost like being anesthetized.
Exactly. And then a second series of beeps wakes them up. But they aren't where they were. They are near Ashland, New Hampshire. They've traveled 35 miles south.
Right.
And they have very little memory of how they got there.
That is the missing time, the gap, the interrupted journey.
They look at each other confused. The drive has continued, but their consciousness hasn't.
So they get home. It's dawn. And the weirdness just keeps piling up. They expect it to be maybe 2.0 or 3.0 a.m., but the sun is coming up.
The clock is all wrong.
The drive took hours longer than it should have.
And it's not just the time, it's the physical evidence. We have to look at what they found the next morning. Their watches, both of them, had stopped working. They never ran again.
Just dead.
Dead. Barney's shoe toes were scuffed and scraped as if he'd been dragged across pavement while his toes were pointed down.
That's a strange detail.
A very strange detail. The binocular strap is broken, which matches his memory of tearing them off in panic.
And the dress.
That's dress.
Yes, the dress. She found it torn at the hem, the zipper, and the lining. This was a dress she had just bought. She loved that dress.
And then there's the car.
The car. Betty goes out to the car and finds these shiny concentric circles on the trunk. And when they place a compass near them, the needle goes haywire. It whirls.
That's such a classic UFO detail now, the electromagnetic interference. But at the time, they were just confused.
Totally. And the psychological impact was immediate, too. Barney, this dignified, pragmatic man, feels compelled to go into the bathroom and examine his genitals.
Which is a disturbing detail that foreshadows what comes out later in hypnosis.
Absolutely. He found nothing immediately, though later he reportedly developed a circle of warts in that area.
And Betty has this compulsion to hide the luggage. She takes the bags they use on the trip and shoves them near the back door, like she doesn't want to look at them. They are reacting to trauma they can't fully remember. They feel stained.
And then the dreams start.
10 days later, Betty starts having these incredibly vivid, recurring dreams for 5 nights. She sees a roadblock. She sees small men in blue uniforms. She sees medical exams.
And she writes it down.
She writes all of it down in November 1961. But here is the key distinction. Barney has no dreams. He remembers nothing. He just wants to move on. He wants to forget the whole thing happened.
He wants to put the lid back on the box.
Exactly.
But they do report it. They aren't hiding in a bunker. They go to the Air Force, Project Blue Book, and they go to NCAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena.
And the investigator there, Walter Webb, interviews them extensively. His conclusion is fascinating. He calls their story ironclad. He finds them completely credible.
He believes them.
He notes that they aren't trying to embellish. They are actually holding back because they are afraid of sounding crazy. He doesn't think they are lying. He believes they encountered something.
But the memory of the abduction itself, the inside of the ship, that didn't come out until years later, right?
Correct. It wasn't until 1964, 3 years later. Barney was suffering from ulcers, anxiety, high blood pressure. His physical health was deteriorating, and doctors couldn't find a physical cause.
He was psychosomatic. The trauma was eating him alive.
That's what it looked like. They finally sought help from Dr. Benjamin Simon, a psychiatrist in Boston.
And we need to clarify Dr. Simon's role here. He wasn't a UFO hunter. He wasn't looking for the truth is out there.
Far from it. Dr. Simon was a man of science. He was an expert in treating shell shock and war trauma. He wasn't interested in proving aliens existed. He was treating their anxiety and the amnesia for that missing time.
He was a doctor trying to heal his patients.
That's all he was. He maintained a neutral stance on the reality of the event. He just wanted to help them recover the memory to clear the trauma.
So he uses hypnosis. He puts them under separately. And over 6 months, a narrative emerges that fills in that 35-mile gap.
And this is where the story becomes the archetype for all abductions. Under hypnosis, they describe the car being stalled by men in the road matching Betty's dreams. They describe the beings.
Let's talk about those beings, because today we call them the Greys. But in 1964, that wasn't really a standardized term.
No, it wasn't. They described them as gray-skinned with large craniums and small mouths. But the eyes, The eyes were the thing.
What about the eyes?
Barney, under hypnosis, was absolutely terrified of the eyes. He described wraparound eyes that seemed to push into his brain. In the transcripts, his voice rises in pitch. He's screaming. He said, "I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes."
It's visceral. Listening to the tapes which exist is haunting. This isn't someone telling a story. It sounds like someone reliving a nightmare.
It does. And remember, they were hypnotized separately. Their accounts generally matched, though there were differences. Barney recalls being dragged, eyes closed out of fear or command, which explains the scuffed shoes.
Ah, so that's where that comes from.
And Betty, true to her personality, fought back. She says she kicked like hell.
I love that about her.
Yeah.
Even being abducted by aliens, she's not going quietly.
Not at all. Then come the medical exams. They are separated. Barney is laid on a table. He describes a cup being placed over his genitals, implying a sperm sample.
The classic abduction trope begins.
And Betty describes skin, hair, and nail samples being taken. And then the needle.
The needle in the navel. This is the part that makes people squirm.
She describes a long needle inserted into her navel. The beings told her it was a pregnancy test. She said it caused immense pain. She screamed, and then the leader touched her eyes and the pain vanished instantly.
Just gone.
Just gone.
There are some oddly humorous moments in the transcripts, too. The beings seem totally confused by human biology.
Yes, the denture incident, it's incredible. They tried to check Barney's teeth, and his dentures came out.
He had dentures.
He did. And the beings were baffled. They dropped back in surprise. Then they checked Betty's teeth, and they were fixed. They couldn't understand why one human's teeth were removable and the others weren't.
That's hilarious and terrifying at the same time.
And they asked things like, what is age? They didn't understand time, vegetables, or basic human concepts.
It's those little details, the confusion about dentures, that make it feel so weirdly authentic to me. Like, if you were making up a story about advanced space overlords, would you have them be confused by false teeth? It's so mundane.
It adds a layer of high strangeness, certainly. It suggests a vast cultural or biological gap that a sci-fi writer might not think to include.
Okay, we have to talk about the star map. This is one of the most famous pieces of evidence from the case. Maybe the most famous.
It is. During the encounter on the ship, Betty asked the leader for proof of where they came from. She wanted a souvenir. He wouldn't give her one, but he showed her a 3D map, almost holographic.
What did it look like?
It displayed heavy lines for trade routes, light lines for occasional trips, and broken lines for expeditions. Under post-hypnotic suggestion, Betty drew this map.
And for a long time, this was just a drawing of dots and lines. But then, in 1968, Marjorie Fish enters the picture.
And we need to understand the sheer labor Marjorie Fish put into this. Marjorie Fish was a school teacher and amateur astronomer. She didn't just look at a chart. She built a complex 3D model of sun-like stars in her living room.
Like a physical model.
Physical model. She used beads suspended on strings, creating a three-dimensional box of our stellar neighborhood based on the Gliese star catalog. She spent years viewing these beads from every possible angle, trying to match Betty's sketch to a specific viewing vector in space.
That is dedication.
It was obsession, and she found a match. She identified the two large stars in the foreground as Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2.
And that was huge.
It was massive. It gave the incident a veneer of scientific credibility. It became known as the Zeta Reticuli incident. For a while, it looked like we had a return address.
But science marches on. And this is where we have to be rigorous.
We do. To be fair to Marjorie Fish, she didn't make a mistake. She was working with the best map humanity had at the time from 1969.
Okay.
But in the 1990s, the Hipparcos satellite went up.
And it tightened the tape measure on the universe.
Exactly. Hipparcos remeasured the neighborhood with vastly more precision. And when we applied that new data to the Zeta Reticuli pair, the distance wasn't what Fish thought it was. The stars were further apart.
So the model broke.
The angles changed. The pattern that looked so perfect in her living room simply evaporated. Fish herself, to her credit, later rejected her hypothesis based on the new data.
And Carl Sagan weighed in on this too.
He did. He pointed out the problem of pareidolia. Seeing patterns where none exist.
Like seeing shapes in clouds.
Exactly. He showed that if you look at a random field of stars or random dots on a wall and you draw lines between them, you can almost always find a pattern that matches a sketch if you look hard enough. Without the lines, the map is just random dots.
So the star map, as compelling as it was, doesn't really hold up to modern astronomy.
Unfortunately, no.
But we still have the dress. We mentioned it earlier, the torn hem, the zipper. But there was something else found on it.
The pink powder.
Right. Betty found this pink powder on the dress days later. She hung it out in the wind, and the powder blew away, but it left stains.
And this dress was stored for decades.
Hmm.
In the early 2000s, it finally underwent chemical and biological analysis. The findings are, well, they depend on what you want to see.
What did they find?
According to the analysis, the pink stains were concentrated in the areas where Betty said the beings gripped her. The armpits, the sleeves.
Okay, that's interesting.
And the substance was identified as a biologically derived material.
That sounds promising for the believers.
But when we say biologically derived, we have to be specific. The analysis suggests it was likely mildew or fungal growth, possibly fed by organic compounds like oils or sweat.
Oh. So, not alien.
Well, when they did DNA testing, they found human DNA, presumably Betty's spider DNA, and alpha proteobacterium.
Alpha proteobacterium sounds sci-fi, but it's not, is it?
Not at all. We aren't talking about space germs. We are talking about the stuff found in dirt in every backyard in New Hampshire. It's common soil bacteria.
So, no alien DNA.
No. The absence of exotic DNA is actually the loudest piece of evidence here. But the expert insight in the report suggests that the marigold smell Betty reported on the craft, she said the being smelled like burnt leaves or marigolds, might have been related to this biological degradation.
So the dress confirms a struggle. It was torn, and it confirms exposure to nature, but it doesn't chemically prove extraterrestrial contact.
That's the long and short of it, yeah.
It's frustrating, isn't it? Every time we think we have a smoking gun, it turns out to be, well, soil bacteria and pareidolia.
But that's the nature of investigation. You have to strip away the wishful thinking.
So if the star map doesn't work and the dress is just mildew, we have to look at the skeptics' arguments, because there are some very strong counter-narratives here. And the biggest one involves a TV show. This is where the timeline gets uncomfortable for the believers.
The Outer Limits connection. This is a fascinating piece of detective work.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline. Barney goes under hypnosis on February 2010, 1964. This is the session where he screams, where he describes those terrifying wraparound eyes that became the icon of the abduction phenomenon.
It's the defining moment. That drawing he made of the eyes is legendary.
But, and it is a massive but, turn the calendar back just 12 days. February 10th, 1964. What was on TV?
The Outer Limits. Specifically, an episode called The Bolero Shield. And if you pull up a screenshot of the alien in that episode, the Bifrost alien, and put it next to Barney's sketch,
It's a match.
it's not just a resemblance, it's nearly a carbon copy.
Describe it for us.
The alien in the show has a large, bald head, no nose, just two slits, and these massive, dark, wraparound eyes. It talks about eyes pushing into eyes.
Wow.
There was another episode a week later.
Yes. The Children of Spider County, which air on February 17, just 5 days before the session. It featured an alien with glowing eyes and a car stalling.
That is suspiciously coincidental.
It's hard to ignore.
It is. The implication, put forward by skeptic Martin Kottmeyer, is that Barney may have subconsciously incorporated these images from pop culture into his recovered memories. This is called contamination.
So Barney's a guy who likes sci-fi. He's sitting at home, stressed, ulcers flaring up. He watches this show. The image gets lodged in his subconscious.
And 2 weeks later, Dr. Simon puts him in a trance and asks him to visualize the fear. His brain reaches for the scariest thing it has on file, and that's what comes out.
And Dr. Simon, the hypnotist, eventually came to a similar conclusion, didn't he?
He did. Dr. Simon believed that the initial sighting of the light was real. He thought they saw something in the sky that scared them. But he concluded that the abduction narrative was a shared fantasy.
A shared fantasy, like a folie à deux.
Exactly. He believed that Betty's dreams, which she wrote down and shared with Barney repeatedly over breakfast, over dinner, became the template.
So Barney heard her stories so many times that they seeped into his subconscious.
That's the theory. So when he was hypnotized, he wasn't remembering the event. He was essentially reciting Betty's dreams back as his own memory.
That explains why their stories matched so well.
It is the most parsimonious psychological explanation. You have a couple under high stress, sleep deprived. Remember, they had been awake and driving for roughly 21 hours, and they have a scare on the road.
Let's talk about that sleep deprivation. They had been driving for 21 hours.
They were exhausted. They were trying to beat a hurricane
Yeah.
and driving on dark, winding roads. One analysis by Jim McDonald suggests that the UFO appearing and disappearing actually matched the visibility of an aircraft warning beacon on Cannon Mountain.
Explain that.
If you are driving on that road, the beacon looks like it's moving because the road curves and changes elevation. It would appear, disappear behind a ridge, reappear somewhere else. It would look erratic.
So you have exhaustion, a blinking beacon, a fear of bears, and a high-stress drive. It's a recipe for misidentification.
Exactly. And then you layer on the Cold War anxiety of 1961, the fear of invasion, the fear of the other, and for the Hills, the fear of being an interracial couple in a hostile society. All of that pressure has to go somewhere.
There is also the issue of Buddy's credibility later in life. And I feel bad bringing this up because she was such a force, but the sources are pretty clear that she became, well, a bit of a UFO celebrity.
It is a sad but necessary part of the story. After Barney died in 1969 of a cerebral hemorrhage, tragically young at 46, Betty continued to promote their story, but she began claiming to see UFOs constantly.
The sources mention she claimed to see entire squadrons and even levitating trucks.
Yes, there was an incident at a 1980 conference where she showed photos of what she claimed were UFOs, but to the audience, including other ufologists, they clearly looked like streetlights and camera blurs.
And she was jeered.
She was reportedly jeered.
That's heartbreaking.
It is, and it raises a difficult question. Does Betty's later gullibility undermine the original 1961 event? Or was her later behavior a reaction to the trauma and the fame? Did she feel the need to keep the story alive, or did she genuinely lose the ability to distinguish reality from fantasy?
It's hard to say. But even with all that debunking, the star map, the TV show, the beacon, the story survives. It hasn't just survived, it thrived. It changed the world.
It did. And that brings us to the cultural legacy. Before The Hills, if you looked at sci-fi movies or UFO reports, there was no standard. But after The Hills, the gray alien became the standard. The short stature, the big head, the black wraparound eyes.
They codified the alien.
They did. They introduced the concept of the medical exam and missing time into the popular consciousness.
The X-Files, Communion, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. None of that looks the way it does without Betty and Barney Hill.
Spielberg even used the concept of the music tones in Close Encounters, which echoes the beeping sounds the Hills heard. This story rewrote the mythology of the 20th century. It created a secular demon for the modern age.
But I want to circle back to the Betty and Barney exhibition in Portsmouth. Because beneath the aliens and the star maps, there is a very human story here.
Yes. If we strip away the saucer, we are left with a postal worker and a social worker. An interracial couple trying to navigate America in the 1960s. They were active in the NAACP, they were trying to make their community better.
And in a way, the abduction story overshadowed their actual life's work. They spent years fighting for civil rights, but the world remembers them for being the couple who got taken.
That is the tragedy. They were regular people caught in a phenomenon larger than themselves. Whether that phenomenon was extraterrestrial or psychological, it consumed their identities.
So after all this, where do you land on it? What does it all mean?
It's complex. I mean, if you look at the physical evidence, the dress, the radar, the star map, it largely falls apart under scrutiny. The dress is mildew. The map is random dots. The eyes are likely from TV.
But there's a but there, I can hear it.
But the psychological reality of their terror was undeniable. Dr. Simon, the skeptic, admitted that Barney was genuinely terrified under hypnosis. He wasn't acting, he was reliving a trauma.
Right.
The question remains, what caused that trauma? Was it a shared delusion sparked by exhaustion, or was it something else?
It's the gold standard of abductions for a reason. It has just enough detail to be convincing and just enough ambiguity to keep us debating it 65 years later.
Precisely. It sits right on that razor's edge between impossible and undeniable.
You know, there's one thought I can't shake. We talk about the star map being debunked and the eyes being from the outer limits. It's easy to say, case closed, it was all in their heads.
It is the logical conclusion.
But if the star map was just random dots and the eyes were from a TV show, what did they see on that road that terrified a pragmatic WWII veteran enough to make him flee into the darkness? Barney Hill wasn't a man who ran away from things. He fought in a war. He fought for civil rights. He carried a gun for protection. But that night, he ran.
That is the lingering question. Even if the memories recovered later were influenced by culture, the inciting incident, the light, the fear that seems to be real, something happened on that road. We just may never know exactly what.
And I keep thinking about what the leader said to Betty on the ship. When she asked where he was from, and he asked her if she knew where Earth was on the map, she said no. And he said, If you don't know where you are, is there any point in knowing where they are from?
A profound statement, whether it came from an alien or from Betty's own subconscious. Perhaps the answer isn't about where they are from, but about understanding who we are.
That is a lot to think about. We want to thank you for listening to this deep dive into the Betty and Barney Hill case. If you're in New Hampshire this April, go check out the exhibition. It sounds like it's going to be incredible.
Absolutely. It's history worth preserving.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.